Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my last Star Wars The Bad Batch episode review. So this one's going to be for Season 3, Episode 15, The Cavalry Has Arrived. So full-on series finale here for The Bad Batch. And overall, I thought it was a very good finale. I didn't think it was excellent, but I don't have that many issues with it outside of the fact of, like, like a lot of times with finales, like, did it resolve everything? Did they make the right choices about what the kind of finale was about versus what the whole series was about? There might be some debate about, did they overly refocus the show going into the finale too much on the Bad Batch specifically, when the show clearly, I think, showed us that it was at its best when it was able to cover the Bad Batch and the broader clone kind of storyline and what in the landscape of Star Wars are we doing with the clones. But I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that I'm assuming there'll be some series at some point down the line that focuses on what Rex is up to, what Echo and Emery at the end are going off to do. You know, that we'll get something somewhere that focuses on what Omega goes on to do, that sort of thing. So the only criticism that I really have is just that it didn't do everything that was set up in the Bad Batch. But if your focus was just on being pretty satisfied with the kind of Bad Batch characters, I think they definitely did that. Sure, you could say to a certain degree they played it fairly safe with the overall way in which they did this, in that I don't think a lot of, on a minute-to-minute basis, what they did over the course of the episode was super surprising with what they had done in the previous episodes in terms of setup. I felt like a lot of what pretty much what every character did was heavily foreshadowed and very obvious what they were going to do, and it was just a matter of seeing some specifics really come to light. Towards the end, definitely, I think they made a few kind of interesting choices, and obviously they went for more of a happy ending. We didn't see any of our real kind of hero characters die here, but we did see quite a few of the villains get killed off, and that was an interesting choice, and it probably worked out for the best, because I think it's very easy to fall into the trap in a finale of, we need to kill off one of the heroes to make the stakes high, when actually a lot of people are more just after the happy ending, and it's perfectly fine to do the happy ending, and it actually really worked in this show's case, kind of being able to do that. But I think we have to go through this one kind of scene by scene here to sort of cover what we have. So I have a document here that roughly has the main kind of plot points as they come up, and I have a bunch of screenshots for the kind of key moments, of course. So when we open up, of course, we do have an injured Wrecker. They really emphasize this, that after the fight with the monster in the previous episode, he is kind of injured and he's not at 100%. And this is probably one of the things you're maybe led to believe, is because he gets then shot in the leg later on in the episode. So you're convinced, I think, Wrecker's going to have a last stand here and he'll die, bringing down the rest of the enemies or something like that. But no, Wrecker ends up surviving, and in terms of a setup for maybe a bit of drama, that actually worked, I think, pretty well. But of course, the team's going to head into Tanta's base, and we'll come back to this in a second about, crosshairs and the final moment of, like, hey, remember you're part of the team. We do get Hemlock introduced to the fact that, hey, we captured Rampart, and he just talks about how important his project is. Like, you didn't have any ambition, I do. And this is more or less a setup for the idea of Rampart realizing that, oh, wait, secret project, you say? Maybe I could secretly do something about this and facilitate this and get back into the Empire's good book. So here we have the setup for what Rampart is actually going to be up to here. immediately you could get the sense that, okay, there's no heroic kind of turn for this character. He's going to look for a way back into the Empire's good graces, basically. So you see him latch on to some of the stuff that Hemlock says, and then they also emphasize him seeing Nala Se in the prison on the opposite side of the room. So interesting stuff there. In the continuation of the last episode, we do see Emery basically talking to Echo, and she makes her mind up immediately here. She does want to do the right thing, and so she is going to straight away help Echo, help Omega, help the Bad Batch, and so immediately, no question, she's on our side. So that's good. And it was very clear from the setup that that was going to be the case. Then we get Omega immediately. And I like the pacing here at the start of the episode. We're just straight into it. All the setup's been done in the previous episodes. We don't need to mess around. So straight away, Omega's just like, okay, you guys all know what the plan is. We're doing it. So Omega and the others drag the droid kind of underneath so that they can't really see what they're doing with the droid. And very quickly, Omega sort of reprograms it so that it will target the Doctor. So the kind of knockout injection goes into the Doctor rather than any of them. And so this is how they're free now to escape, because of course there's already been a distraction with the idea that there's been a base infiltration. So there's not a lot of people just monitoring the kids in the vault. Now there's no one there. So they're free to just head out through the hole in Omega's cell into the kind of the blood transport system, basically. Then as we kind of go through the episode, we of course get the idea of, as set up in the last episode, of course the Zillo Beast was going to be used as this like ultimate distraction, and that's exactly what happens. She sneaks in exactly where she was last episode, deactivates the protections and stuff like that, keeping the Zillo Beast in place. It goes on a rampage, takes out a bunch of the guards in the room, and then basically heads for the surface, heads to break out of Tantis. And so, very cool sequence. The Zillo Beast has always been a very cool kind of creature in Star Wars. We of course got the setup from this in the previous season, and then all the way back to the Clone Wars as well. So, interesting stuff. But I would definitely say, I wish they had maybe gone a little bit more in depth in terms of what was actually happening here with the Zillo Beast, because of course it gets used here as a big distraction, but they don't really cover the idea of like, why were they just containing it within Tantis? Like, I get they were doing some sort of research, but be a little bit more specific. Otherwise it does feel like it's just here for plot convenience purposes, even though there was the setup for it previously. We get like Emery and Echo, and I do like during this kind of middle part of the episode that Omega's on the move, Emery and Echo are on the move, the Bad Batch themselves are on the move, and they're all in or around the same kind of location, heading for the same situation, but they're all just a little bit offset, and then eventually all the plots do come together. So it's quite a well constructed episode, I think, as well. What they do here, and I suppose I'll briefly mention it at this point. I was super happy when I loaded up the episode for the first time to see that it was like 52 minutes on the Disney Plus timer. Obviously, subtracting the credits, it's about, I think, 48 minutes overall, but I was really happy to see that, yes, it's more than a double-length episode. That's definitely the time required. And so my worries from the end of my last review immediately alleviated, just because they've given themselves the time for the finale, and I think it paid off for them ultimately. Then we get this kind of important scene here, which is right before they're about to sort of head in and the whole Zillo Beast thing happens. Crosshairs decides, no, you're injured. You two go back there, call Rex for help. I'm going in alone. And the two of them are immediately like, no, we're not doing that. We are still that squad. Despite what you say, Crosshairs, despite the loss of tech, we're still the Bad Batch. We're together on this. We know the risks. Omega needs all of us to get this done. You are just going to sacrifice yourself if you go in alone. we're all doing this. And I really like that as just a nice character point before what could be the group's last kind of mission together, because they know they could be killed. It's just the confidence that they're doing it together. And of course, they get their opening because the Zillo Beast bursts through the entrance to Tantus, creates the opening that they need. And I like the joke here that they Echo basically. Omega Echo immediately knows Omega caused the Zillo Beast to break out, and of course the rest of the team also agree with this. Very fun thing where I think it's Crosshairs who says, like, was this Echo or Omega? And they're like, yeah, it was Omega. Absolutely, no chance it was Echo. Even though Echo says, like, that's exactly what I would do, type thing. So, then we get Omega and the kids. They're going to basically follow the path that the Zillo Beast took to escape, which is by going up the kind of shaft and out through the sort of like main entrance kind of hangar bay. And there's a nice little moment where Jax reveals he's afraid of heights, but Omega's like, no, we can do this if you just follow us. Wrecker's also afraid of heights, but he's the like strongest soldier that I know, which is a nice little moment that Omega is the veteran among this group of kids, that they're so inexperienced at doing this sort of like mission type stuff, and she guides them through it. It's a nice leadership moment for her. In response to all of the craziness happening, of course, Hemlock decides, okay, got to bring everyone in on this. So he activates 4 of his clone operatives. I kind of lose track of just how many of them there are as the episode goes on. But interestingly, this doesn't really go anywhere in the episode. There's no reveal. There's no Tech's actually alive and he's one of these clone operatives. It does just come out as they're just 4 random clones who got brainwashed to become one of these clone operatives, and they are meant to be our sort of evil Bad Batch. They all have sort of specialized skills and weapons, and they're just meant to be a counterpoint enemy in the finale for the Bad Batch. That the Bad Batch are not just going up against troopers and clones who are allied with the Empire. No, they're going up against sort of similarly specially trained clones, and that's meant to be part of sort of like the gimmick of kind of what we're doing here. But I was glad that they at least brought them into the episode, even if they kind of ended up getting just sort of used a little bit kind of like the Knights of Ren, where it's just they're here to look cool, be sort of threatening for a little bit, but then ultimately just be defeated. But it's fine ultimately. Echo at this point realizes kind of what's going on, and like everyone else, they're heading up as the Bad Batch are sort of heading in, so everyone's sort of heading for the same location at this point. And then we get to one of the big action scenes. As they head in, the clone operatives, of course, ambush them, but they're assisted by a bunch of troopers, and immediately it becomes clear that, like, oh yeah, we need to retreat, like this is not going to work. But then there's some air support outside. The damage, the debris starts to move around, they're blocked off, and so as they're forced to fight, they do basically get boxed in and captured, with the notable thing of, like, you end the scene with the idea of, wait, is Crosshairs going to get his hand chopped off? And that is in fact what happens, which I do think is a little bit of a random plot point. Like, I know they've been teasing the entire season the whole idea of like Crosshairs with the shaky hand and what's behind it. Is he going to recover from it? It's a weird resolution to this, to have his hand get chopped off, to sort of, it sets up the moment in like towards the end of the action scene, which we'll get to. But I thought it was a weird payoff or way to kind of go about resolving a plot that has been referenced in nearly every episode like this season, like that Crosshair's looking at his hand, there's something wrong with it, he can't hit the targets. So odd one, certainly, just with the fact that they did this. I guess in the absence of them killing anyone off, they wanted there to be some more serious kind of long-lasting consequence. So a limb getting chopped off is, I guess, one way to do that, certainly. Because otherwise I think you'd be led to believe that Wrecker's probably going to get killed at some point. That's maybe going to be the big thing, but that doesn't happen. So we have Echo and Emery walking past and seeing that the Bad Batch have been captured as we kind of cut between scenes. You can see here that, of course, Echo wants to help, but he's going to prioritize first getting the kids to safety. And I did like that moment of him realizing that, yes, everyone on the Bad Batch would make the same decision I'm making. Like, they seem like they're going to be okay for the next little bit. The important thing is getting the kids out. And so at roughly the halfway point of the finale, effectively the first episode of the 2-episode finale, this is what we do here. The kids get out safely. Emery gets out safely. And Omega and Echo stay behind. That's what we're doing here. And I thought this was the right choice, just to be like, cool, we're just doing these characters get away and the actual Bad Batch members stay around. So we don't have to worry about the side characters potentially being at risk. No, we've succeeded to a certain degree. The kids are at some point going to get put back with their families. And Emery makes it out. Is an interesting one. So we're not going to tease any sort of potential death with her. That, I think, was the right thing to do. And I liked it as a nice moment of just Omega's faith in Emery being confirmed here. Her, being part of the team for this last bit of the mission. She'll get the kids out because she cared about the kids from a bunch of episodes ago. But the team is going to stick together here. I really liked what they did here in this sequence. Then we see, of course, Hunter and the others going through the sort of conditioning, the brainwashing effectively to make them operatives. Hemlock sort of talks about the idea of like he's altered the procedure after Crosshairs was able to resist it. This is why he's not an operative right now. But it seems like with enough time, he can turn them, regardless of how strong they are, into clone operatives. But this is distracted by the fact that Tarkin calls in to speak to Hemlock. So the high-ups kind of becoming involved because, of course, things have gone off the rails quite heavily from a security, stability standpoint. Of course, some reports would make it back to the top brass here. And then, yeah, we have Echo and Omega going to the prison. They free everyone. It's a pretty quick sequence because we have to get things into order pretty quickly. But I like the setup that we have here of like Echo gets his big moment here with regards to like what he and Rex are doing. They're here to get the kids out, but they're also here to free the clones that are here that have been captured. And that's exactly what he does here. But he's kind of like, there are some other clones captured. They're my squad, the Bad Batch. And he basically asked them all, like, do you have one more fight left in you? I know you've all been captured and you want your freedom, but one more time. And they agree. Everyone's involved. Everyone's going to join the fight here. Very nice moment for the clones. And that was effectively for the finale. That was about the best we're going to get when it comes to sort of a clone uprising type situation here. Is just freeing this handful of clones that they have in this facility. There's obviously, I guess, a a bigger story maybe at play when it comes to the larger population of remaining clones that we might cover at some point down the line. But we also freed, in the middle of all of this, we freed Nala Se and Rampart just here as well. So we have to explore what's going on with these characters. So of course in the middle of the breakout, we're not overly focusing and being picky choosy on who we're going to keep in prison or not. Otherwise, you think that maybe they should have just left Rampart in there, but he's helped them, so okay, we'll let you see what can happen. But yeah, Nala Se decides that she has to destroy her research. It's the only way that Omega's actually going to be free. Which I do like that there was just this very clear setup for this. It's like, you can get out, but if they know that you're important, and they just find that in the data, they'll find you again exactly for the exact same reason that you were brought back here. Because again, the season started out with Omega captured. She escaped and was captured again. The idea of preventing this happening for a third time is we have to basically erase your importance to the Empire by not letting anyone know that you actually are important. So Omega hands over Emery's datapad to Nala Se, as Nala Se goes to kind of right the wrongs, get rid of the research on Project Necromancer. But this is where Rampart comes into play, because he follows Nala Se because he wants to find out what's going on with this project and do some good here. That if he can stop her potentially from destroying the research, him saving the research will save himself effectively. The scene with Tarkin is basically just like, hey, I'm on my way because it seems like you've lost complete control of this situation. I'll be there with a task force shortly to sort things out and stabilize what's going on. And there's a clear sense that Tarkin is not invested necessarily in Project Necromancer, and we see that in the Tarkin scene at the end, which we'll get to. But then we basically just get the kind of freeing of the Bad Batch sort of sequence here. Omega again spies on what's going on through the walls. She orders like Echo and the clones to, okay, start the attack. I'll free them when I get my opportunity. But before that, we do get the resolution on the Rampart side of things, which is, across the next couple of scenes, we see him. This covers a few scenes, like. As they're walking through the corridors, she picks up a thermal detonator, and he doesn't really notice this, but he then picks up a blaster to try and corner her, which he does as she's looking through the databank. And right as he asks her to be like, hey, tell me about Project Necromancer, she activates the timer on the thermal detonator and is now just going to stall him while she waits for the explosion to go off, basically. You might question a little bit, like, what sort of a stock timer is there in a thermal detonator? Because I think we've seen these used, and it's basically just meant to be like a grenade, a couple of seconds, but she activates it here. I'm guessing it maybe isn't a timer, and it's more of a kind of like, what do they call it? Like a dead man's trigger type thing of like, the second she lets off the switch, there's like 5 seconds and it explodes. I think that's the intent of the scene, if I remember how it works. So that's probably the logical way to interpret that. But yeah, we get the Echo and the clones against the operatives here. Doesn't go super well here because they're in enemy territory and everything happens, of course. And we do see Omega kind of infiltrate. She deactivates specifically the locks on Wrecker's kind of restraints. But then she gets spotted by one of the operatives. Hemlock comes in and it seems like it's all gone wrong. Omega's been captured. A lot of the clones have been taken out. And then Hemlock activates his special gas, which takes out everyone down below, except Echo, because he's wearing one of the helmets, of course. So it seems like the battle is basically over. Now we're getting into the resolution style of things. So, of course, off in between scenes, I guess Nala Se has explained to Rampart what Project Necromancer is. And he's kind of like, oh, this is going to get me back in good with the Empire. But she says, no, it's my research. It belongs to me. It belongs to the Kaminoans. Which I like that she kind of says that, because she's been very focused on specifically Omega. But I like that we kind of go back to the idea of, like, she's a proud Kaminoan as well, and what happened to Kamino. So the fact that she's kind of going to take this super important research with her and not just give it away to the Empire. It's a nice kind of bit of focus on her character, I think. So yeah, what we get here is when she says this, Rampart shoots her, and I think the idea is as she drops the thermal detonator, the timer then activates just a few seconds, lands right next to Rampart, and he can barely react before it goes off. And the idea is, of course, we learn later on the databank has been destroyed. And if that's destroyed, well, both of them are also destroyed. So Rampart's gone in this scene, Nala Se is gone, but so is the databank and all the information on Omega and everything Hemlock's done effectively with Project Necromancer. So, interesting stuff there. Then we go to the next scene here. So yeah, Scorch informs Hemlock that the databank has been destroyed. He's still holding on to her, but she then reveals that, hey, I have my brothers here with me. And so Wrecker gets up, throws the metal that's kind of covering him at, I think, first Crosshair's one, and there's like a whole sequence where like Crosshairs ends up getting up, Hunter ends up getting up. They're still kind of groggy, but it's enough of a distraction to where enough of Hemlock's guards are now gone. He feels he has to resort to desperate measures, so he cuffs himself to Omega and escapes with Scorch basically acting as his kind of personal guard here as they take off down the kind of ramp to a transport that's on its way. And then we get effectively the taking out of all of the operatives here. So Wrecker joining the fight, helping Echo, leads to them taking out a bunch of the other operatives. Some of the clones begin to wake up from the gas at this point, and they help out too. Hunter and Crosshair end up pursuing Hemlock down the ramp with Omega, and we get this really cool standoff sequence on the ramp in the rain. It sort of reminds you of Kamino in a way, and I'm wondering, did they go for that for a specific reason, because it's always lashing rain on Kamino, and it definitely came across like that because they're on like planks, gangways, over like giant drops, and that's a lot of kind of how Kamino looked. It feels kind of very thematic. But yeah, we get some quick resolution stuff here. It's like they head out. Scorch just seems to get taken out like immediately. He takes a few shots, falls off the ramp, and it's left with Crosshairs and Hunter on one side, and then Hemlock holding on to Omega on the other. And he's threatening to kill her, but that's not going to be the case. So there's this standoff where it's like, well, you're going to have to do something to take her from me. What are you going to do? And especially with Crosshairs missing a hand, it's the setup for what do we do here? Is Hunter going to take the shot? No, he's going to trust Crosshairs to make the shot with his bad hand. And that's what it comes down to here. There is a nice bit of trust between the full group here, because Omega takes out her little lockpick, and she's going to kind of stab him, create a bit of an opening, because Hunter's plan is that, like, you can't just shoot Hemlock, because if he falls off the bridge, because they're cuffed together, she'll go down with him. You have to, when she kind of creates the separation, you have to shoot the cuffs so they're separated, and then we can finish off Hemlock, and he'll go down, she won't. And so that's what happens here. It works. He makes the shot with his bad hand. Hemlock goes down. He takes like 3-4 shots, falls off. Much clearer death, you'd say, than probably like something like Tex, which, again, they stick to that, even though it maybe wasn't the most clear. And it leads to a pretty happy moment here, because this is the resolution basically right here. It's you think maybe there's a few more things where like the facility's going to go up, the Zillo Beast will return, but no, it's like we've dealt with the conflict. They're going to make it out. All of the key people are killed at this point. Hemlock's gone, Scorch is gone, all the clone operatives have been taken out. All that's left is random guards. Tarkin hasn't arrived yet. We can make it out. It seems like it's a safe run to the finish line here, and that's basically what happens. They get on board the shuttle and they make it out. It's just surprising that, like, oh, we're all just making it out. No one of significance has died. Of course, we've lost a bunch of the clones along the way, but a few of them do survive what happens here. So they get out everyone. The kids of and Emery have gotten out already. Great, like we're going for the happy ending. Tarkin, they go to hyperspace. Tarkin's forces arrive from hyperspace, so they just miss each other. And then we get Tarkin inspecting the damage to Tantis. We get the confirmation that yes, none of Hemlock's research is salvageable. The databank is gone. And so Tarkin just orders the facility shut down, and he wants the budget for basically Project Necromancer here reassigned to Project Stardust, which is, of course, the Death Star project. So nice setup there, but you have to assume, well, I guess the Emperor wants both of these projects, but like, I can't imagine the Emperor is super happy with Tarkin taking away from his revival project to just do the Death Star. But it'll be interesting to know if there's any disagreement there on that, or if the Emperor even knows. Moving into basically the epilogue scenes next, we have back on Pabu, we see all the clones from like the earlier episodes this season. They're like escorting the kids around because Echo and Emery are now talking about this stuff. They discuss about how they never had a childhood, and that's why they like kind of helping other people to kind of facilitate that. And they just talk about how they're going to help in the best way that they can. Echo sort of opens the door to her helping out by saying that, like, hey, your information, your experience would be helpful to Senator Chuchi in terms of trying to, fix things. So the idea is that these two go off together. Like, they're going to go, I guess, back to Rex and Chuchi and that whole side of things. And it feels kind of abrupt because we only really got to know Emery like this season. So I would say Emery, Echo, Rex, that whole thing, it feels like there's your opening to do some sort of a spin-off, because we didn't really go super in-depth on like the rest of the clones, in the sense that there are a few open plot threads when it comes to stuff like the Wolf. We saw him in a previous episode, but they didn't tell the full story to where, this is how Wolf comes to join up with like Rex and Gregor. So that still needs to happen. And then there's still stuff like, say, Commander Cody. I don't think we know about what happened to Cody since everything happened. So I'm guessing there's another clone series, mini-series happening at some point. Because the other point that they said was that there's going to be some form of content coming up in the future that will explain, like, basically how Ventress is alive again. And obviously, we have Tales of the Empire, not Tales of the Jedi, Season 2, coming out in like a day or two, like 3 days, is it? Is May 4th, I think, when it's coming out? I'll be reviewing that as well. But that is not focused on Ventress as far as we're aware. So it feels like there's an announcement of something else to happen at some point. And then, obviously, like, they're going to have to announce a new animated show at some point, because Tales of the Jedi and Empire are only like shorts. We need a series effectively to come in here to kind of replace the Bad Batch. And so I'm eager to see what that is, because there's the potential for a few things, but I would say something that's still roughly set in this era, just refocused on different characters who aren't necessarily the Bad Batch, is probably the right way to do it. And they've kind of given themselves the opening here with Emery as like an interesting option, Echo, Rex, and all the stuff I just said before. So we'll be interested to see what becomes of that stuff. But as we go into the sort of like the final scene before the kind of time skip here, Omega asks about basically, hey, what's going on with the kids' families? Are we going to find them? And Hunter just explains that, yeah, we're going to protect the kids until we find their families. We're working with Rex to make that happen, but they should get the kids back to their families eventually. And the highlight here is then, as we switch focus to the clones, is that the rest of the clones are now free to follow their own paths. They get to choose. That's the other thing that feels like some sort of resolution, at least with the clones, but because it was just a grouping of clones rather than we've freed all of the clones, it still feels like there's an opening, like I said, for the Rex stuff to do more. But this was nice just to explain the people we rescued. Here's what we can do. The kids will get back to their families. The clones have freedom. We have freedom to do what we want. In a way, our fight is over. Now we can relax and just be at peace here on Pabu and see where we go. And it's a nice shot here to highlight that, hey, it's the group, and we fixed things. We did it. Like, Omega shouldn't be hunted anymore. Everyone has come out of this and is alive. Like, Wrecker's got to recover from his injuries. Crosshairs has lost a hand. But they're here. They're at peace. And they've got Omega out. Good. Like, it's a nice ending for the kind of present day stuff. But then it's nice, but you still feel like we need a little bit more. Like, come on, I need this to feel a little bit more satisfying. And I think they mostly do it with this kind of epilogue flash forward scene. So I don't know exactly. I don't think it says until maybe we get an episode guide, but it looks to be somewhere in the region of probably like 10 years later. We see an older Omega has decided that she's going to join the rebellion because the rebellion really needs pilots. She wants to do more, and Hunter, who's the character they focus on here, he just wants to keep her safe. They all do, because she is their kid and she always will be. So she says that they have fought enough. Now this is her fight, and so she is making her choice here to participate in the rebellion against the Empire. And so we see her leaving Pabu to join the rebellion on her ship, as Hunter watches her go. The one maybe unsatisfying thing here is that they only show Hunter older. They don't show Wrecker or Crosshair older, even though the dialogue clearly suggests that they're both still alive. So we don't know really what's going on there. I guess Hunter was the one who was primarily the kind of father figure of the group, so it makes sense. But I almost am just a little bit like, come on, given that you did this, are we not going to get this like 10 years on? Because of course the rest of the Bad Batch have the accelerated aging, so they're all going to look a lot older. There's just a slight thing of like, was it the right choice to only go for Hunter versus doing all the other characters, and why did they do it that way? But it's nice to know that it's just like, it's not just that the series is going to repeat itself, that a year or two from this point on, Omega gets hunted down again. No, she lives in peace up until this point, and then she makes her decision when she's kind of a fully grown up to, no, I'm joining the rebellion. That, like, we already sort of discussed in the original series, the idea of fighting back against the Empire, but that is actually what I want to do. And now the idea is, do we get a series or any focus on Omega going forward? Because we don't know what her fate is into the future. What role specifically does she play as things go forward? But I think the design for older Omega is really cool. I like that they sort of include, in a way, the kind of Hunter bandana thing with her as kind of a kind of hairband type situation. That's kind of nice. And you could see that they definitely took some design elements from like Emery, who's also like a female clone, but slightly different. And so I do really like that overall. So that's where the Bad Batch ends. Like I said, I'm overall pretty happy with this. Like I said, I'd give this like an 8.5 out of 10 probably. Just that score that's like really, really good. Wouldn't quite give it the 9 or like 9.5, 10, like absolute excellence, approaching perfection, but just very, very good. Some of it will depend on what sort of follow-up, just in terms of like series or like when we come back to some of these characters. But in general, just as the Bad Batch characters themselves, I like that they went for the happy ending. I like that they didn't, in a way, overcomplicate it to a certain degree, but in a way, the fact that it was relatively straightforward and to the point takes away a little bit from the fact that this was a 3-season show. We spent so many episodes setting up a lot of these plot elements. It does feel a little bit weird that some of them really weren't the focus, like, at all of the finale, in the sense that, like, say, Project Necromancer, it's like, I guess the takeaway overall with that is just that Omega was basically the 100% solution to Palpatine's problem. And if she just was used to her maximum by the Empire, Palpatine, I guess, would have had effectively perfect clones. And that would have been probably a permanent victory for the Empire that we probably couldn't recover from. But because of what we did here, keeping Omega out of the Empire's hands and then destroying previous data about her, we have put that project back into the Stone Age, to the point where, like, the Grogu setup has to happen going forward, and you know, they have to use the remaining ashes of this project to try and resurrect it at some point. But it never fully comes together in perhaps the way it could have come together if they had used Omega. So the positive here is that they've prevented the sort of easy solution for Force-sensitive cloning with Omega, and that's our main takeaway. We were never really going to go into the weeds and refocus on the Empire and what they're going to do next as part of the project. Maybe we can get back into that more in relation to what's going on with like the Mandalorian and the Grogu aspect of this plot point, and we just accept that it's more of a sequel era thing, and this is sort of the resolution of this project, at least in the kind of Clone Wars, early Empire era style thing. There's stuff like that I think there is some frustration when it comes to, like, even I would say the core nature of Omega as a clone, in terms of like, why was her blood so special? How did that happen? What was Nala Se doing that she made Omega like this? Is it just that, like, in the same way some of the other clones, like Wrecker, Hunter, Crosshairs, had special abilities, Omega's one just related to her blood, and that was it? The idea of, like, Nala Se was basically saying, my research will go down with me. And is that effectively how to make another Omega is also lost in this. But they never really got into the weeds on why Omega is special, apart from that, like, oh, well, her blood works for this reason, but why did it work that way when other clones didn't? Was it part of the fact that she was effectively an unaltered clone, besides the fact that she's a girl? Or what? Just some of those situations where I think they just took the approach of being very simplistic rather than getting into the details on it. But there's still an opening to cover that stuff at some point later on down the road, I suppose. But like I said, overall, I am mostly positive on this. And I would say in general, for me as a reviewer, I would say it can be tricky, in my opinion, sometimes for like the ending of shows to just work really, really well. And I think this one has done quite well as someone who can often be disappointed with endings of shows. So I view that as being a pretty good, statement overall about the show, that I don't feel too strongly that it kind of misses the mark in many regards. I think they did it well, especially not falling into the trap of like needlessly killing off characters just for the sake of making the stakes higher for the finale, which maybe season 2 a little bit at the end kind of fell into. But yeah, they're my thoughts on The Bad Batch season 3, kind of in a way The Bad Batch overall. This season, I definitely would say was probably the overall most consistent. Did it have the absolute high highs from a pure writing standpoint that some of the season 2 episodes had? I'm not quite sure when it comes to that. I think some of the season 2 episodes are probably some of the best in the series, and maybe best animated Star Wars episodes we've ever had. But consistently, start to finish, this was a lot better. There were less episodes that felt sort of skippable like there were in the first 2 seasons, but I'm glad they haven't had the show go on an excessively long amount of time, and I'm eager to see what they decide to do next in terms of Star Wars animation. Do they continue with the sort of tales of situation and they can just tell short stories wherever they need to, or what's the next series that we're actually going to get? I'm excited to see what they do. But we don't have too long to wait for the next Star Wars animation. Like I said, Tales of the Empire coming out May 4th, I believe it is. So I'll be reviewing that. I don't think we know exactly how long or anything like that it is, but I'm assuming it's going to be roughly the same length as the first season. So we'll see how that goes when I review it. But yes, that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.